looking at your clauses, I mean, I'm not familiar with constitution countries, but I would definitely say you need to, in terms of citizens' participation, that is really to do with personal responsibility, that everyone has to take personal responsibility for doing what they need to do when it comes to mitigating climate change. But I think you have to be careful with citizens' participation in terms of taking the government to court or doing that. It needs to be government who has the powers to do that. We rejected the Citizens' Assembly for climate change because we are a representative government, so we represent people, and there already is a people's voice, which is our voice, the MP's voice in Parliament, and that is really important to say that. I would certainly look at our Environment Act and our Agriculture Act, and actually the Conservative Environment Network's centre-right climate action declaration that was made in 2021. I think that's a pretty good anchor there for what we're trying to achieve here. And so the government in the UK has legislation that will use a carrot and stick approach, enforcement, and basically leave it to private sector to really ramp up economic growth in the green revolution. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, actually, it's really helpful. I think Edmund has his hand raised, so please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for these comments, which are so relevant to us. I just wanted to put the situation in the moment we are living in this constitutional process. For a start, it's a two-step process. We are finishing the first one, which has been in hand of the expert commission. And the articles and in this chapter you are seeing is what we're to vote in the next days. I'm a member of this expert commission. And starting June 7th, we are beginning the second step of this process, which will be in hand of the Constitutional Council. They are to work this chapter. So this is the moment, because we are not in condition, as Jaime said, to change what this is on the screen. We're to vote it, and it's going to be approved. But we have a chance to change it starting June. And what would love to hear from you are precisely the comments that you are making of this, stressing these angles or remembering what's to be done, or how we should deal with the public people's participation in the decision-making process. Well, your suggestions are to be proposed in these lines starting June, because we're having 3-4 months where we'll be able to change this article. We cannot do it in the expert commission, but we can do it in the council. So we would love to hear from you more specific propositions dealing with these articles. And I think that would be quite well read by all of us. Jaime and myself are not members of the council as such, but we are to keep our job assisting them. So we'll remain until the end of this process, which is to be finished by November 7th and voted by the people in December 7th. So we have some time, if you can take these proposals and deal with some concrete suggestions to our study and the betterment of the chapter. Thank you.
Yes, on that matter, I think it's very important the collaboration role that exists between the constitutional experts who are finishing their duties right now, and then the Constitutional Council, composed by elected members, will start their work in what's the date?
In June 7th.
June 7th. So there's this two instances where they can work on this clauses and collaborate with each other. And that's why I value deeply that Carolina Navarrete, who is one of the elected members of the council, is present here, so she can take note of your propositions and observations on this.
And Arturo too.
And Arturo, yes.
And
Sorry,
Arturo.
I
Okay.
cannot see everyone in the screen, but yes.
So,
Arturo.
just if I can, something that jumps out at me is this phrase in the middle of our screens where it says encouraging private collaboration in this task. I suspect if it was us, and John, you might want to jump in on me, we might suggest something about enabling private investment. So it's not just individual members of the public collaborating, but it's something about enabling long-term investment. Whether or not you want that in the constitution or that just being a point that you want to continue making, I think is quite important. And then I was just surprised. I mean, I know nothing, right? I'm sitting here the other side of the Atlantic, and but I was surprised that there wasn't something more about water use, because I know that's such a hot topic there. And something about responsible water use. Do you think that will come up in the next stage? And where are you on that issue?
There are a couple of provisions. I will copy them immediately.
Okay.
Yes, and Teresa Sañartu is very interested in all things relating water and legislation regarding that issue. So please, Teresa, go ahead.
Yes, you'll have to bear with me a couple of more seconds. The whole water issue is hugely complex here, because you have different groups that are really interested in water, and they're like interest clash most of times, because you have the farmers, the miners, and the like ecocentrist people that want to like expropriate the water from the miners and the farmers. So in the last constitutional process we had last year, there was a provision that expropriated, that took away the water rights that are centuries or decades old for some people, and that caused a huge like impact on the press about the effects that clause was going to have on the country and on the farmers. So the constitutional experts, I think, avoided the whole the press impact on a more complex or deep reform on water, and also because last year there was a huge reform on water law, which is far more detailed than what a constitution can do. So the articles that the experts have approved and will vote this and next week, which Jaime is projecting now on screen, are mostly based on what the water law reform introduced, and it doesn't delve deeper, unlike the old constitutional process, which had huge impact on the press, and which would have had huge economic and I dare say social impacts, because the farmers would have fought each other for the water. They thought it was theirs, the miners and the indigenous people too. So it's a delicate equilibrium, which is not easy to play with. I mean, the water law reform took 11 years to pass on Congress. And I also wanted to say before the whole water issue that besides the clauses on chapter 2 and chapter 13, there is another in Article 28, which is about I'm sorry, once again.
Don't worry.
Duties. So it says it's duty of every person in Chile to protect the environment and to prevent environmental damage, and to respond if it occurs. So the environment is an issue that sits in the basis of this constitutional project. So it's I think a more wise and balanced idea than the last I'm sorry, than the last constitutional effort, because that constitutional effort was fully ecocentrist. It banned every private investment, and it had like 100 clauses fully on environment and state. So I think it's an advance.
And
thank you for bearing with me.
In order to maybe add something to what Teresa just said, I also think it's very important to see these clauses in relation with the others that treat such issues like freedom of economic freedom and investment. So I think it's regulated in a more general way than only in the environmental issues that we are seeing right here, but also we have to see this whole text that it's pretty long but very, very rich, I think, as a constitutional proposal. So I think that is with this specific clauses regarding private collaboration added to the clauses that treat the freedom of economic freedom and all the classical constitutional rights that we have already in our constitutional tradition, we can add up to something that's very good in tackling this issue that we have discussed regarding private investment and public overseeing of these issues. Sally, you had your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, just looking at your the water. So I think it's good that you've put that the right to water and sanitation in accordance with the law. That's loosely open enough to be able to put your own legislation in, and it's the duty of the state to guarantee this right to present and future generations. You've got privatized water companies. Yes, have you got privatized water companies in Chile?
I think
yeah.
Well,
so it's good that you've got. So I just think looking at the there is a human right to water, and that is in Article 11 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. There's an element in there that states the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, and that right to water is an element of that. The UK believes that, like you've got here, and I think this is really important because you were talking about farmers and miners and the competition there and the grabbing of water supplies is that the UK does believe that the right to water entitles everyone to a sufficient amount of reasonably affordable and accessible water that's necessary for survival. So actually prioritising drinking, cooking and personal hygiene. It's not a freestanding right and doesn't include water for industry, recreation or transport. And I think that is something that is quite important. So then it avoids the competition, perhaps. So I think that the use for human consumption and sufficient domestic use shall prevail is a good one to highlight.
I mean, I think
sorry, Vicky, I've put something in the link because I've put in the link to something called the Water Resource Southeast. So 6 of our water companies came together. They've done a consultation. They came together in November last year before the government published its plan for water in April this year. And it's 6 water companies that have come together because in the Southeast, as Vicky said, we have got water scarcity. We've got a lot of population. We're in the dry, warm bit of the UK and we have too many people. You know, if we could pump water down from Scotland to the Southeast, that would be great. So I think one of the things in that plan, and it's actually really good, it's aimed to secure water supply. You know, it's all about, sometimes it's about nature-based solutions. It's about having water attenuation ponds, people having water butts. There are a lot of things that personal individuals can do themselves to store water for their garden, but also in terms of, you know, what else can water companies do with the help of government to create more water resilience and water supply?
I think, like Teresa said before, this is an issue that was very deeply discussed in the latest reform to the legislation on water, especially regarding human consumption and how the different systems that provide water to different areas of the country work, because we have different systems, mainly different regarding if it's in the cities or in the countryside. And that's where we have the systems that are very specifically regulated in the law, that work in collaboration with each other. In the cities, we have bigger companies that are in charge of providing clean drinking water and for domestic use. And in the countryside, we have these small communities that gather around to extract water from a source and provide it to the people, mainly for farming purposes. I think that's one of the main issues that it tackles between these two big lines of service in providing clean water in the country. So I think it's very important that the Constitution gives this broad framework, as you said before, that allows the laws to do the more detailed regulation on these issues, and that allows everyone to have drinking water as an easy access. That's one of the main issues that we're facing right now, that there are some places in Chile that are very isolated and cannot access to this network of clean water, for example, and they have these big trucks with water tanks that provide those places with drinking water. So that's one of the issues that I think it's more proper for the regular laws to treat more than the Constitution, giving the Constitution this broad framework for it to work.
I mean, one of the big fights that we have is on what is sufficient domestic use. I'm sure that's a fight that you have as well. You know, some people that will say that means I need enough water to fill 3 swimming pools and my massive gardens that need to be watered in the middle of the day and the sunshine, etc. And I just politically, I'm sure you're all over it, but you need to make sure that you're being with the people on that argument and not with the very extremely wealthy. Just be careful. I'm sure you're
and there are many policies, just like Teresa was saying in the group chat, there are many policies that look forward to not use, for example, clean water that's available for drinking, to water the parks and public spaces, and reusing, for example, purified water from kitchens or domestic appliances. That's one of the policies that have been very difficult to push, but are having great impact. And I think the current, even though we're opposition right now, I think the current Minister of I forgot how to say it in English, Obras Públicas, infrastructure, and she worked in the association of the companies that provide clean water, the sanitary companies.
Public Works.
Public
Works.
Yes,
Yeah.
so she, I think, has a very clear view on that issue, and she has pushed this this policy very, very passionately. So I think that's a very good alternative to reach for sources of water that are not drinking water, to use for these other things like parks and recreation and watering the trees on the streets. And
the other thing that differentiates us from the left politically is that the left will always say we can run the world by top-down planning, okay, by giving instructions from the center and by planning everything from the center. But the center right, and one of the reasons that I believe in center right policies, is that we believe that if you empower people and enable them to behave responsibility and look towards their future, then they will make the right decisions. Okay, so enabling people to be able to act in that collective way without forcing them is, I think, an important part of the narrative. To keep that thread going through all of your environmental discussions as well. You know, John, can we take this document away and run it by a few other members?
Yes, we'd be very happy if you're able to share it with us. We'd be very happy to provide some written comments on that. Absolutely. I was just going to ask, if I may, while I've can steal, while I've got the floor, I was just going to ask about how the articles that you have put here have changed since the first draft of the Constitution, which was obviously very controversial and obviously was rejected in a referendum, whether this is something that is seen as more reasonable, particularly actually to people who are on the right and who don't support the current president.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge difference to have not only experts writing the actual constitution, but to have like the experience of what the effect of the reforms they wanted to push was on the public. Because some people thought that it was going to be super popular to like take away the water rights and distribute them again, and it was not. So the experts can grab that experience and work with it, and work also with examples from other countries. The problem of the old example was that they wanted to like reinvent everything, the wheel, from the wheel onwards, and so it introduced a new like a new category on things like it was I don't know how to translate it, because it was an idea from one person, but that person influenced a whole bunch of members that was inside the group that oversaw the environment issue. So they pushed for it. They approved it, and it destroyed all the knowledge and tradition that had been built over the other category. So so in conclusion, I think it's one example is miles away from the other. It's more balanced. It's actually based on evidence and on the importance of the public and private sector, while the other was hugely maximalist, and it overlooked the impact that the private sector and the people had. I mean, the people, if they see interest or their own interest being taken care of, they will fight for the environment if their lives are improved. So what the old example did was base everything on the state and the state and the state and the state, and it forgot that people have economic interests, and they want to take control too of their own lives, and this is also what changes on these constitutional articles and clauses.
Thank you. I've got to go in literally 1 minute, but does Jaime have anything else to say?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to add that there are two key differences between the text of the convention, which was rejected last year, and the now that we are currently writing. The first one is related to the rights of nature. That kind of sentences or expressions are completely abandoned in this new constitution. We are not in favor of that kind of wording. We are not in favor of rights when we talk about nature. So, and the other key issue is that we adopt an anthropocentric kind of view. That means that if we are going to protect the environment because it's mainly related to the protection of people, persons. So it is not like in the previous version, in the last convention, the text was much more related to ecologism or pantheism, a view of nature and its value in itself. So that the idea that nature has to be protected, whatever the cost is for humans. And so we like to be to try to have a protection of nature compatible with the human development. So I would say that those are the big difference between the previous proposal and the current one.
I'm very conscious of time, so I think we should probably wrap it up there. But I'm very, very happy to carry on this conversation online or indeed elsewhere. Thank you, Vicky and Sally-Ann, for contributing.
Good luck.
And everybody who has from Chile as well. I think we have a lot more we could discuss, and I think certainly appreciating that we will never achieve anything we want for the environment or the economy if we don't take people with us. And I think that's the most important part of what you're doing and what we're doing. So please stay in touch, and many thanks for your engagement with us today. Thank you.